Hey guys, it's me. No, it's not. What's that? You think I'm dead? Well, if I were dead, I wouldn't be able to say anything, would I? So what do you want me to say? Okay, I buried alive. But no worries, because this is just a small adventure. In today's exciting episode of Buried Alive But Still Breathing, enjoy. In today's video, we're going to meet a man who woke up only to realize he was buried alive. We'll also meet a man who survived being buried alive by pure chance. And finally, we'll meet a woman who somehow managed to free herself after being buried alive. Our first story comes from Russia. A man named Roman, who worked as a painter and decorator, was contracted to paint some rooms in an apartment building. And while working on the job, Roman decided to take a break and have a smoke. That was when he remembered that he had left his cigarettes at home. So he decided to go back home real quick to get them. But little did he know that this would be the last time he would ever see daylight. As he was about to reach his house, he heard a loud clap of thunder, and soon the sky opened up and torrential rain started pouring down. Fearing he would ruin his mobile phone, he took shelter in a manhole. But this turned out to be a grave mistake. As soon as he stepped into the hole, the ground caved in and he was buried under tons of dirt. The man tried to call for help, but nobody could hear him as the noise of the rain was deafening. To make things worse, within seconds, the water started receding, and the remaining water filled with mud started oozing out of the hole. The pressure of the water forced more soil to fall in, and before he knew it, he was completely buried alive. Thinking fast, he started digging the soil with his bare hands. And after 20 minutes of frantic digging, he managed to create a small cavity with just enough space to breathe. However, it wasn't long before the oxygen in that small cavity got depleted and he started suffocating. Just when he thought all hope was lost, he remembered that there was a ventilation pipe nearby. With the last of his strength, he crawled towards it, pushed his head inside, and started breathing the fresh air. He spent the next 4 hours in the pipe until the rain stopped and the water level receded. When people arrived at the site to check on him, they found the pipe and started digging it out. They managed to pull him out just in the nick of time, as he had only 4% of oxygen left in his blood. He was rushed to the hospital where he was put on a ventilator. For spending 3 days in the hospital, he was released and made a full recovery. Our next story comes from Chile. On July 2016, 33-year-old Rodrigo Rojas was traveling in a car with his father and 2 other friends. Suddenly, the driver lost control of the vehicle and crashed into a ditch. The car turned over several times before coming to a stop. Miraculously, everyone was okay, and they quickly called for emergency services. But their celebration was short-lived, because soon the ground started shaking. A large boulder the size of a house came crashing down and blocked the ditch, trapping them inside. Somehow they managed to escape, except Rodrigo, who was trapped inside the car. His right leg was pinned under a rock slab, and his left leg was jammed between the dashboard and the seat. His friends and family started digging frantically to free him, but they couldn't move the rocks. They were forced to stop their rescue efforts and wait for the authorities to arrive. At around 4 p.m., the rescuers used explosives to clear the rocks and free Rodrigo. They then brought him out of the ditch and rushed him to the hospital. At the hospital, doctors tried everything they could to save his lower leg, but unfortunately, they were forced to amputate it. Now, what's scary is that they only realized the next morning that Rodrigo had survived the entire ordeal. This means that he was trapped inside the car without any oxygen for almost 12 hours. How did he survive this long without any food or water? Well, that's still a mystery. Our next story comes from Peru. In March 2018, 71-year-old Agustina was traveling in a bus with her husband and daughter. Suddenly, the bus skidded off the road and fell into a deep ravine. The impact of the crash killed Agustina's husband, while she and her daughter survived. Her daughter, who was seriously injured, couldn't move, so Agustina had to leave her behind and seek help. But when she came out of the bus, she realized with horror that she was surrounded by angry locals who were accusing her of killing their family members in the crash. She tried to explain to them that she didn't do it on purpose, but they didn't listen and started stoning her. Thinking fast, she pretended to be dying and collapsed on the ground. That's when they stopped and started looting her belongings. They emptied her pockets, stole her jewelry, and even pulled out her dentures. When they were done with her, they dragged her to a nearby well and threw her inside. She landed in a pile of cow dung, which cushioned her fall. Somehow, despite being severely injured, she managed to free herself from the well and run away. She walked several kilometers before she found a highway where cars were passing by. Luckily, a good Samaritan offered her water and took her to the hospital. As for her daughter, she was trapped in the bus and was eventually rescued by the authorities. She survived, but both her legs had to be amputated. Our next story comes from China. In September 2018, a 49-year-old farmer named Wang was working in his field when suddenly the ground started shaking violently. Before he knew it, the ground caved in, and he was trapped in a pit 20 meters deep. The pit was filled with a thick layer of mud, and Wang was buried under 20 cubic meters of it. People nearby rushed to his aid, but they could only pull him out half. Unfortunately, as the pit was too narrow, they couldn't pull him out completely. They had no option but to leave him in that precarious position overnight. In the morning, a crane arrived, and with its help, they managed to pull him out of the pit. At that time, his body had been crushed for 12 hours. Despite multiple fractures and a punctured lung, somehow, he was still alive. He was immediately taken to the hospital where he underwent a 6-hour surgery. He remained in the hospital for another month as doctors performed multiple surgeries to fix his broken bones. Thankfully, he made a full recovery. Our next story comes from Siberia. A drunk man named Ernazarov was walking home from a bar when he stumbled upon an open manhole. Thinking it was a grave, he decided to lie down in it. But it wasn't a grave, and soon he found himself buried alive under tons of dirt. He tried to call for help, but his calls went unheard. Desperate to save himself, he started digging the soil with his bare hands. After digging for 20 minutes, he created a cavity big enough for air to pass through. He spent the night in that small hole, and by morning, his condition had worsened significantly. When the rescuers arrived, they saw that his face was covered with mud, which had hardened into concrete. They also found that he had stopped breathing, but his heart was still beating. They pulled him out of the hole and rushed him to the hospital where he was put on a ventilator. Doctors managed to remove the concrete-like mud from his face and stabilize his condition. He was then transferred to a burn unit as his entire body was covered with third-degree burns. Doctors fought tirelessly to save his life, but unfortunately he succumbed to his injuries and died. Our next story comes from South Africa. A 2-year-old girl named Courtney was playing with her 5-year-old brother outside their house, when suddenly the ground caved in and buried her alive. Her brother desperately tried to free her, but he couldn't manage. He then ran home and told his mother what had happened. She immediately called the authorities and rushed to the site. Rescuers arrived soon, but by that time, Courtney had been buried for 20 minutes. Despite the odds, they managed to pull her out of the hole and rushed her to the hospital. When she was brought to the emergency room, doctors found that she had no heartbeat and no signs of life. Against all odds, they managed to bring her back to life. She was kept on a ventilator for 3 days, during which doctors performed multiple surgeries to repair the extensive damage caused to her body. While she did survive the ordeal, her brain had suffered severe damage. Doctors said that she might never be able to lead a normal life again. That's all for today's video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos. See you next time.